Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 193, The Dunsparce Deception. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking through a small town, specifically through a grassy area in this town, when they spot a young boy in the middle of the grass, holding a net looking for something. Ash and the gang question what the boy was looking for, leading the boy to reveal his name as Bucky, and reveal that he was looking for a Pokemon called Dunsparce. This prompts Ash to look up Dunsparce in the Pokedex, which reveals to him that it was a bug Pokemon that acted like a bug, though it was actually a normal type, and it liked to run away. Upon learning that Dunsparce liked to run away, Misty stated that although she didn't like bug Pokemon, Dunsparce was one she could get behind if it was going to run away. The boy then reveals that he was having trouble finding Dunsparce, leading Brock to suggest that he use another Pokemon to both find it and weaken it, with Bucky revealing that he already had a Pokemon helping him as he called out his Caterpie. Despite Misty warming up to Dunsparce, she had not warmed up to Caterpie, so she immediately cowered away in fear behind a rock. Ash joked that Misty gets really excited when she sees a bug Pokemon, and Bucky didn't understand his sarcasm, being a dumbass little kid, so he simply responds that he got excited at the thought of bug Pokemon as well. Ash and the gang then sit down with Bucky near some rocks, with Misty having finally calmed down enough around the Caterpie, as she asked him why Bucky was looking for a wild Dunsparce in the first place. Before Bucky could answer, though, a group of children his age walked by him, each having a Dunsparce of their own. The most popular and respected kid in the group, Timothy, then walks up to Bucky and states that they were all going to the park to play with their Pokemon, and invited Bucky to come along, with Bucky replying that he would happily join along soon. By soon, he meant immediately, as him and Ash and the gang went over to the park, where the rest of the children already were, comparing each other's Dunsparce and bragging to each other about which one was better. In the process, mentioning everything that all the Dunsparce would do that made them unique. Some would go out and play by the trees, some would drink some tea, some would sleep, pretty standard shit, but the kids were all amazed by this for whatever reason. As a lot of the kids proceed to argue about which of their Dunsparce was bigger, or which of their Dunsparce was more beautiful, Ash comments on how it seemed like every kid in town had a Dunsparce, and questioned why Bucky was looking for one, assuming that he must have already had one, since everybody else did, but unfortunately, Bucky denied this, clarifying that he had never had one of his own, and had always been forced to simply watch all the other kids enjoy their Dunsparce. As a kid suddenly made his Dunsparce manage to fly, leading a whole bunch of the other kids to try and do the same, with most of them to no avail. Bucky then reveals the reason why he didn't have a Dunsparce, which was that back when a huge Dunsparce swarm had arrived in the town, Bucky was unfortunately out of town, as he had to go and visit his sick grandfather in the hospital. By the time he returned, all of the kids had already captured a Dunsparce, along with several other visiting trainers who had come to visit the town after hearing about the huge swarm, and as a result, there was no Dunsparce left for Bucky to catch. Since his grandpa was now better, and he was permanently back in the town, he decided to try and look for a Dunsparce, but he still couldn't find one, even to this day, so he felt like he was inadequate compared to the rest of the kids. Brock jokes that the Dunsparce got sparse, just sticking true to their name, leading Misty to scold him, explaining that now wasn't the time for jokes, but, was that really a joke? It was kind of the truth. Anyways, despite Bucky feeling like he didn't fit in with all of the other kids due to not having a Dunsparce, he was still included in the kids' activities, as the leader of the group, Timothy, also the kid who had made his Dunsparce fly, invited Bucky to the park's obstacle course, where all the other kids were waiting, stating that they wanted him to join the Dunsparce obstacle race that they were going to have, in which all of their Dunsparce were going to compete against each other. Bucky reminded Timothy that he didn't have a Dunsparce, with Timothy confirming that he knew this, thus allowing Bucky to use his Caterpie instead, stating that Caterpie being different from the Dunsparce just made the kids want to see it compete more, to see how Caterpie compared. Bucky decides to join the race, as all of the Dunsparce and Caterpie get ready at the starting line, with Bucky pointing out how his Caterpie was way smaller than all of the Dunsparce. The race starts regardless, as the Dunsparce and Caterpie crawl across the ground and several monkey bars, as Misty watches, somewhat nervous due to watching the Caterpie. Bucky was nervous as well, as while all of the other kids were cheering on their Dunsparce, who were already making their way to the end of the obstacle course, Caterpie, on the other hand, was still stuck near the beginning, despite it using all of its strength to go as far as it could. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was watching the race from behind the bushes. James and Meowth get excited at the prospect of there being so many Dunsparce that they could steal, but Jessie, on the other hand, was not interested in some measly Dunsparce, reminding James and Meowth that they shouldn't get distracted on some weak Pokemon like that, and they should focus on getting Pikachu. James and Meowth agree, and they all walk away from the race and go back to planning how they were going to steal Pikachu this episode. Anyways, as the race continued, Caterpie reached a staircase, and was struggling immensely to climb up it, but Bucky was motivating it to keep going, stating that there was a Dunsparce that was behind it, so it wasn't in last place. However, this Dunsparce was revealed to be Timothy's, as he then commanded it to fly right over Caterpie, and the Dunsparce obliged, as it flew right over it and got to the top of the steps instantly and slid down the slide, therefore finishing a lap. Bucky thought that this was only the first lap. However, Timothy then clarified that Dunsparce had already completed the third lap out of 4, stating that Caterpie actually was in last place, as it was still on the first lap. The only reason why it was ahead, technically, of Dunsparce was because Dunsparce had already completed several laps beforehand. Bucky tries not to let Timothy's words get to him, as he tells Caterpie to not give up. Unfortunately, though, Caterpie fails to climb up the stairs, losing its balance and falling down, knocking itself out in the process. Bucky hurriedly runs up to Caterpie and examines it to see that it was in fact very exhausted and knocked out, so he decides to abandon the race, saying goodbye to his friends as he runs to take Caterpie home to give it some rest. As Bucky leaves, a girl gets mad at Timothy for even inviting a loser like Bucky to the race, leading Timothy to try and defend his reputation as the most popular kid. Damn, maybe these kids weren't actually Bucky's friends like he thought they were, damn. After seeing Bucky hurriedly rush away from the race, Ash and the gang proceeded to follow him to make sure he didn't seem too upset, and thankfully, he seemed relatively okay, as he simply recalled Caterpie into his Pokeball, telling it that it did a good job and it earned a good rest. Aw, that's wholesome. After seeing how kind Bucky was to his Pokemon, regardless of it not being a Dunsparce like he wanted, Ash and the gang decided to reward his kindness by agreeing to help him locate a Dunsparce so that he could fit in with the other children more. But you know what? I'd say fuck all those kids, man. They're rude to you. Don't bother hanging out with them. But I guess if he wants a Dunsparce, he can find a Dunsparce. Let's do it. Bucky thanks Ash and the gang for their help, as Ash sends out his Chikorita, Totodile, and Noctowl to help search, Misty sends out her Poliwhirl, and Brock sends out his Golbat. Bucky was enamored by all this cool Pokemon, with Misty informing him that if Bucky became good enough, and also had a little luck, he would be able to catch a lot of Pokemon as well, not just a Dunsparce and Caterpie. Misty then decides to let her Togepi help too, but when Psyduck pops out of his Pokeball forcibly, Misty just decides to call it back, as it doesn't help do any searching, and just stands there doing absolutely fucking nothing. Unfortunately, even all of the Pokemon who were searching, along with Brock, Misty, Ash, and Bucky, couldn't find anything at all, despite looking in a whole bunch of bushes, a whole bunch of trees. It was all pointless. Suddenly, though, Pikachu and Togepi, although they were having the same results before, noticed something digging a tunnel, causing a whole bunch of dirt to come up and hit Togepi in the face as it was walking happily. The thing digging the tunnel then moves in a different direction, as the soil starts coming up even faster due to the thing's increased speed, now hitting Pikachu in the face as well. Pikachu gets annoyed at the dirt in its face and proceeds to try and punch the soil, trying to get the creature to stop moving, curious as to what it was, and this punch causes the digger to reveal himself, being none other than a Dunsparce. Bucky then happens to walk by Pikachu and Togepi, and is immensely shocked that he actually managed to find a Dunsparce. He really thought there was none left in the area. Ash warns him not to let it get away, but Bucky was too shocked, allowing the Dunsparce to quickly escape by digging back into the ground. Everyone then meets up at the spot where the Dunsparce had just retreated to, and declare that what they had to do was simply just use their Pokemon to dig the Dunsparce back out onto the surface. However, before they could do this, Team Rocket's Meowth balloon then appears from behind some bushes, catching Ash and the gang off guard, allowing Team Rocket to fire a net from the balloon and capture Totodile, Chikorita, Pikachu, and Togepi. Bucky had never seen Team Rocket before, so he questions who they were, as Team Rocket revealed themselves, reciting their usual motto, this time dressed in pirate costumes, stating their plan to not only steal Pikachu this time, but also Ash's other Pokemon. Misty then cuts off their motto, and questions why the fuck they were wearing pirate costumes, leaving Jessie and James to admit they didn't know, as they question Meowth, who reveals that it was a mistake with the dry cleaners that they usually got their costumes from. Alright. Team Rocket then pull up the net with the captured Pokemon inside, as Chikorita attempts to escape by breaking the net with Razor Leaf, but the net was made out of stronger material this time, being steel, so the leaves did absolutely nothing. Jessie and James begin to taunt Ash, but Ash didn't panic, as he simply just sent out Cyndaquil and had it use Flamethrower to burn the steel, freeing Pikachu, Togepi, Chikorita, and Totodile from the net, which made Meowth regret that he hadn't made the net fireproof as well. Misty then has her Poliwhirl use Water Gun, which sends the Meowth balloon plummeting down to the ground and causes Team Rocket to fall out of it, and Meowth to fall right next to a lump of soil that the Dunsparce was located in, and then pops out of. Ash then has Cyndaquil use another Flamethrower to send Team Rocket blasting off, leaving Meowth to grasp something in desperation, being the Dunsparce, as he tried to hold onto the ground as opposed to being blasted off, but this didn't work, as he blasted off with Team Rocket, still holding the Dunsparce in his arms. This causes Team Rocket to actually be somewhat happy, despite the fact that they were getting blasted off, stating that having Dunsparce was better than having no new Pokemon. While Team Rocket was happy, Bucky was depressed at the fact that he had failed to catch a Dunsparce, mad that he had finally been given the chance, but fucked it up. Ash and the gang cheer him up, though, by telling him that everyone made mistakes, and assuring him that they would help him find a whole new Dunsparce. Yay! Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were very closely observing the new Pokemon that they had obtained, with Meowth very proud of himself for capturing a Pokemon by accident, and happy that Jessie and James were pleased with him as well, only to find out that Jessie had changed her tune. She no longer was happy with this Dunsparce, claiming that it was too boring of a Pokemon. Meowth then argued what they had all initially agreed on, which was that having a boring Pokemon was better than having no Pokemon at all. But James argued that they might as well have had no Pokemon at all, as he doubted that Giovanni would care for one measly Dunsparce. This gives Jessie the idea to capture dozens of Dunsparce, stating that Giovanni may find a huge amount of them interesting. James and Meowth agree with this, though they wonder where they could get a whole bunch of Dunsparce when they remember how all of the kids in town seem to have one. Team Rocket then comes up with a plan to steal all the kids' Dunsparce, being a virtual 3D Pokemon show, to capture the kids' attention, and gather them all in one place so that Team Rocket could steal all of their Dunsparce at once. Team Rocket then puts their plan into action, as James disguises himself and goes into town, exclaiming that there was a show going on at the local theater, so all the children go to the theater, with their Dunsparce, finally being intrigued enough by something to stop playing with their Dunsparce for once, as they hope to see things like moving holograms or computer-controlled puppets, since it was a 3D virtual Pokemon show. Much to the kids' dismay, though, there was no moving holograms or computer-controlled puppets. Instead, there was simply James and Meowth cosplaying a Moltres and Dunsparce, respectively. James being able to cosplay a Moltres because he still had that Moltres costume from back during that episode with Cassidy and Butch. Anyways, the entire reason why James and Meowth were cosplaying was because they were trying to act out how a Moltres was better than a Dunsparce in an effort to get the kids to want to trade their Dunsparce away for what they believed would be a Moltres, when it of course obviously wouldn't be. Team Rocket planned to convince the kids that Moltres was better than Dunsparce by putting on an acting show, which was why James and Meowth were dressed the way they were. However, this acting show was not interesting the kids in any way, shape, or form. For starters, they were mad that James and Meowth were just obvious cosplayers as opposed to 3D computer-controlled Pokemon or some shit, and stated how they felt like they were misled by the title of the show and scammed, leading Wobbuffet to then pop out of its Pokeball and Jessie try and kick it away so it didn't interrupt the show. However, Wobbuffet then came out once again as the kids continued to complain about the show, this time stating that they thought school plays were better. Jessie simply kicked Wobbuffet away again and whispered to Jessie and James how the kids didn't seem very interested, so they would have to start with the most exciting part of the play, being the battle between Dunsparce and Moltres, which was supposed to influence the kids that Moltres was better than Dunsparce. James and Meowth oblige and begin the battle, as James pretends to use Wing Attack on Dunsparce, pushing Meowth down. Dunsparce, aka Meowth, was then supposed to use Defense Curl, but the costume was so tight on Meowth that he couldn't curl up properly. Meowth was then supposed to use Glare, but he yelled to Jessie that he didn't know how to use that move, with Jessie telling him that he was supposed to fake it, as he was disguising himself as a Dunsparce. Meowth didn't want to fake an attack, so he proceeded to give up and walk off the stage, leading Jessie to angrily push him back on, demanding that he not quit. Meowth eventually obliges to Jessie's request, although all he does when he gets back up on stage is shout the word Glare, causing James to get confused as he expected Meowth to do some sort of actual move. To stop James from just standing there doing nothing, and therefore putting the play on hold, Jessie then orders James to use Fire Spin, whispering to him how he was supposed to do it, as James had forgotten how to do it. This leads James to pull out some red streamers and throw them onto Meowth, leading the children to remark how bad of acting and how bad of props those were. Not wanting to lose the kids' attention even more than they already had, Jessie decides to have James use Sky Attack, but since that was entirely improv and not planned, James didn't know how to do Sky Attack either. Jessie simply orders James to improvise, telling him to just make sure that Dunsparce looked bad so that the kids would like Moltres, leading James to simply just throw Dunsparce away, aka Meowth. The children were not complete Pokemon noobs and knew that that obviously wasn't a real Sky Attack, and once again commented on how bad the acting was. Jessie tried to win the kids over by explaining that this was Moltres' special way of doing Sky Attack, insinuating that Moltres was way better than Dunsparce. Jessie then went on to continue the play, knowing that a lot of the kids probably weren't convinced of Moltres being better than Dunsparce yet. However, James and Meowth declined to continue, stating that they were too tired. This forced Jessie to hope that the kids had been swayed enough in Moltres' direction, and she then pulled out a trade machine and offered to trade a Moltres for the kids' Dunsparce. As Jessie expected, none of the kids were willing to trade their Dunsparce, leading her to get mad at James and Meowth for putting her in this position. This leads James to then step in and try and convince the kids himself that Moltres was better, stating that Moltres had a legendary Holy Flame. This was enough to convince Timothy to trade his Dunsparce for a Moltres, and because he was so popular, he was able to influence all of the other kids to trade their Dunsparce as well. Damn, he really was popular then. The only person who he wasn't able to convince was one girl, who also happened to be Timothy's best friend, also probably his only real friend in that whole group. Unbeknownst to the dumb kids, though, they didn't trade their Dunsparce for a Moltres, no, they traded their Dunsparce for fake empty Pokeballs! But they didn't realize this until after the trade. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang had still been looking for Dunsparce, doing so for hours at this point, but they had been unable to find a single other Dunsparce. I guess Bucky really was just lucky that one time. Anyways. Despite the hours of failing, though, Ash and the gang's encouraging words to Bucky were still ringing in his mind, as he declared that he wasn't going to give up and he was going to keep looking for a Dunsparce no matter what. Unfortunately, all that Bucky and Ash and the gang eventually found were all of Bucky's quote-unquote friends crying their eyes out, leading Bucky to question what happened, especially to Timothy, who revealed that they had found out about how they were scammed, noticing the fake Pokeballs. When Ash and the gang and Bucky asked for more details, Timothy reveals the full story of what had happened, being that a trio had tricked the kids into trading away their Dunsparce for what they believed to be a Moltres, only to get empty Pokeballs in return instead. Misty then requests the kids to describe what the trio of people that tricked them looked like, leading Timothy to give a description that matched Team Rocket, leading Ash and the gang to realize that Team Rocket must have been behind the scheme. Timothy then requests that Ash and the gang do something to get everyone's Dunsparce back, with Bucky also pleading Ash and the gang to do the same, stating that he was concerned for his friends. But once again, Bucky, you should not be concerned. These people clearly weren't your friends. Anyways, Ash and the gang oblige as they go to find Team Rocket and get back the Dunsparce. As Bucky stays behind with the rest of the kids, chatting with his best friend, the girl who hadn't traded off her Dunsparce, very happy that she had decided to keep it. Anyways, speaking of Team Rocket, they actually weren't having the best time, as soon as they retreated into the woods to check out their new Dunsparce that they had, when James let them out to check on them, they all ran away, before he could recall them back into their Pokeballs. Jessie was furious at James for this. However, James rebutted that he merely did as Jessie had asked, as Jessie had asked her to send out all the Pokemon, but Jessie clarified that she only wanted James to check on them, not let them run away like a fucking idiot. As Jessie then ordered Wobbuffet and Meowth to go searching for all the Dunsparce, Ash and the gang then showed up, having found Team Rocket, knowing that they were the ones responsible. Jessie doesn't want to reveal the fact that Team Rocket had lost the Dunsparce, as then that would mean that Ash and the gang would try and go looking for them, and could find them before they did, and take them back. So, Jessie simply lied that Team Rocket still had the Dunsparce, and stated that if they wanted them back, they were going to have to beat Team Rocket in a battle, as she then commanded Wobbuffet to battle. Ash and Misty accepted Team Rocket's request, as Ash sent out Totodile, and Misty sent out Poliwhirl, and Ash had Totodile use Water Gun. However, Wobbuffet was able to counter, therefore deflecting the Water Gun back at Totodile. This led Misty to try a Water Gun of her own with Poliwhirl, but Wobbuffet counters that as well. However, he fails to send the attack back at Poliwhirl, since he dodged the attack. which shocks Wobbuffet enough to distract him, and with Wobbuffet distracted, Ash is able to order Totodile to use Water Gun again, and this actually makes contact because Wobbuffet wasn't able to use counter in time. With Wobbuffet severely injured from the Water Gun, James took action by sending out his Victory Bell to help out. However, Victory Bell did absolutely nothing, as it simply ate James as usual. To make matters worse for Team Rocket, Bucky's friends had heard all of the commotion going on, so they came running, thinking that maybe Ash and the gang had found the culprits. When all of Bucky's friends arrive, their Dunsparce suddenly come back as well, having been hiding in the bushes from Team Rocket, but now feeling comfortable since their trainers were back. Jessie desperately sends out Arbok to have it block the Dunsparce's path so that it couldn't return to their trainers. However, Bucky's friends then order their Dunsparce to use Screech, which freezes Arbok in its tracks so it can't do anything as the Dunsparce walk right past it. Jessie tries to scream at Arbok to stop being frozen and to go after the Dunsparce. However, the screech was too loud, so Arbok couldn't hear her, and then the Dunsparce used Glare to fully freeze Arbok permanently, so that it couldn't move, even after the screech ended. All of the kids then had their Dunsparce team up and use a collective bunch of takedowns, and all of these takedowns were enough to send Team Rocket blasting off. With Team Rocket gone, all of the kids then happily reunited with their Dunsparce, as they thanked them for all of their help against Team Rocket. Suddenly, the Dunsparce that Bucky had spotted earlier then came out from the ground and went through some trees and bushes, arriving right in front of Bucky. This led Bucky to get excited that he could potentially catch the Dunsparce again, so he sent out Caterpie to battle it. Caterpie started off the battle by using its tackle attack, but it barely phased Dunsparce, allowing it to use a tackle of its own, followed by a tail whap that knocked Caterpie to the ground. Caterpie wasn't done yet though, so Bucky followed up with a tackle and string shot combo, which was enough to weaken the Dunsparce, knocking it down. So Bucky threw a Pokeball, and although it took quite a few shakes, and it looked as though Dunsparce was about to escape, the Pokeball stopped shaking and officially caught the Dunsparce, leading Bucky to celebrate immensely. He'd finally done it. Bucky's friends then all come up to him and congratulate him on finally catching a Dunsparce, and invite Bucky to join another Dunsparce race, now utilizing his actual Dunsparce that he had, which Bucky happily obliged to, although he made sure that Caterpie didn't feel bad about losing the previous race, so made sure to have Caterpie on his shoulder the whole time so it could watch the race and cheer on Dunsparce, as he did as well, as the Dunsparce actually managed to do quite well in the race. Ash and the gang then prepared to leave to continue their journey, watching the race from afar, not wanting to distract Bucky, and they didn't want to distract him by saying goodbye either, as they were just happy to see him happy with his Dunsparce, so they walked away without saying goodbye, although Bucky spotted them and said goodbye anyways, along with his friends and their Dunsparce.